Hello, you all. We would like to welcome you today to our new Brazilian debates, and just going to share here with you. Sorry for that. The theme for today is planning cities in uncertain times. And we have invited Dr. Ricardo Esteves from the Architecture Department and Dr. Bruno Magalhães from the International Relations Department so that they can be debating about the theme with you today. I hope you enjoy the debate, and just a few words before we started. We just seen a video about puc-rio. Puc-rio is having its 80th anniversary this year. So we prepared this small video so that our partners and people around the world can know a little bit about the campus and see it with this nice bossa nova soundtrack. And we would like that you all can come and visit us as soon as this times we're living in pass and we have a new normal with us. So with no further ado, I'm gonna pass the word to my colleague, Bruno Magalhães, who is gonna start talking to you. Bruno.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Professor Ricardo. Thank you, Professor Ricardo Esteves, and all the attendants. It's a pleasure to talk to you. It's a pity that we cannot be talking in person, but let's try to make the best of a bad situation. My name is Bruno. I'm a associate professor at the International Relations Institute, and I'm a coordinator of the Digital Humanities laboratory that PUC is implementing right now. Personally, I do research on human migration, and that's the subject I'll be talking to you today about what can we expect around the subject of human migration in a new normal post-COVID world. Okay, so that's the game plan. I will now start sharing my screen with you. Please do let me know if there's any issue. Okay, you should be seeing my screen now. Okay. Ricardo, is everything all right? Should I go on?
Everything all right. Go ahead.
Perfect. So I had the pleasure of being invited to discuss a motion that was selected for us that brings together the issue of city planning and human mobility. So that's why I'm having the pleasure of debating with Professor Ricardo Esteves. So the first thing I did when I was invited was to try to break down the motion, so to speak, of the debate to find out what I could contribute for the discussion. And so this is the topic that was proposed to us about understanding the role of cities as a human habitat and understanding the need to continuously plan the way we live into those cities, accepting that the plans are remaking. It is a iterative process. It's not something you plan, write down, execute. You have to be continuously reviewing that and asking the question of what we can expect in a post-pandemic reality. If we can try and wrap our minds around this terminology that is gaining space now, but none of us, or I'm speaking for myself, quite understand what it means, this new normal reality, and what you need to do to be prepared in this new normal reality. So these are the challenges that I accepted, and the way I try to reply or react to these challenges was by framing the question in a way I could contribute. So reading the motion, it struck me that perhaps there was a role here for me to play as to foster an understanding of what we can expect about this new normal when it comes to international and internal, I'm sorry, there's a typo here. It's impacting international and internal migration trends. So as the motion noticed beforehand, of course, I have no crystal ball. This is planning. This is planning in a particularly uncertain scenario. So this is far from being certainties, but I think that they give us some hints of what we can expect, the challenge we will probably face. So what we can expect, right? So we have to plan according to some projections, tendencies, also political choices that it struck me as very important that we make. And one political choice is, are we going to keep thinking migration business as usual in the post-COVID scenario, or are you gonna take the opportunity that the pandemic is giving us to think new sorts of solutions to integrate migrants into society? And here I think the scenario can be really pessimistic and really optimistic, and that's a stark choice that is presenting itself to us now as most choices in the post-pandemic scenario. We can go from a I'm trying to find a better word than dark, from a really dark scenario to a very positive scenario depending on how we react. If we go to the business as usual route, my assessment, and I'll try to substantiate that assessment during the talk, is that the mixture of pandemics and the impact it will have over human mobility will lock us in an extremely severe economic and as a result social political crisis. That's not my assessment. That is assessment that has been proposed already by reports recently published by the World Bank, by the International Monetary Fund, they are all very alarmed about the long-term repercussions that the pandemics will have when it meets human mobility. But also, and to end on a more positive and a happier, more optimistic note, I think there's also a lot of room to innovate. But I would say that innovation has never been more urgent in that area. Okay, so this is what I'll try to present today. I'll try to set the scene, to explain my reading of the motion very quickly. Then I'll go through what I think I'm more prepared to contribute about, with on the impacts that the pandemics will have over international and internal migration. Then I'll go through policy solutions in the room for innovation. So very quickly, setting the scene, I broke down the motion in three insights that I thought would be important so you can relate to my point of view, to share my reading of the motion. As you didn't see that part, but I was of course sharing with Professor Ricardo Esteves before the presentation. And we're already very excited here during the discussion, because we both we share this idea, that this realization really, that living in cities is a fairly recent proposition. I won't go into detail, even because Professor Ricardo is much more prepared than I am to discuss that. But through human history, the time that we have spending into cities is a really a dot into human history. For the major part of our existence, we have been as hunter-gatherers. But of course, if you organize a society in a way that leaves no traces, that build no cities, you will be erased from history. In contrast, if you organize society in a way that, bring everybody together and build pyramids, you'll be easier to keep a record of your existence throughout history. So the way we think human existence is a bit state-centered. Archaeology is a bit state-centered, and the consequences that we tend sometimes to assume that living in cities is the only alternative that we have, when it's in fact a quite recent lifestyle for humanity. Okay. But of course, that mentioned, there's no denying that once the Civitas template has been established, it has proved it extremely successful. None of what I just said is to deny that we are moving towards increasing urbanization. I think all the trends point into that direction. And according to the standard narrative, we have very good reasons to urbanize. It makes producing things cheaper, and it makes our lives better, right? Quite quickly, we get faster to work. It costs less time and less money. Well, if you had to transport everything from through great distances to factories, our goods would be extremely expensive. The drop in prices that we experienced since the Industrial Revolution would not have happened, and we would not have sometimes one might suggest, even overly consumist societies that we have today. But there are also less questionable opportunities that are given by life in a city, although I'll try to problematize that as well. That is, in economic terms, I would call sharing costs, right? When we bring everybody together, it gets cheaper to build schools that will reach everybody. It gets cheaper to offer qualification, and that creates jobs. And also, it makes it easier to universalize basic public services. So there are very good reasons why we came to live in cities according to this standard narrative, even though, a parenthesis here, even that narrative is questionable. Some authors suggest that we actually were forced to live in cities more than we chose because of the benefits that they offer us. But I won't go into that. But at the same time that we recognize that many advantages that come with living in cities, There are also, there's no denying as well, there are also many risks to which we are particularly exposed precisely because we live in cities. And so this is just one quick map of the sort of issues that we have to face in our everyday lives because we choose to live in cities. The motion suggests that cities remain a human habitat despite the technological advances. I think here I agree completely. The only addition that I would make is also part of how we are managing all those risks, all those problems, also has to do with the increasing role of technology in the way we organize our cities. So it's not only despite technology, but also thanks to technology that we are being able to, in a way, retain a lifestyle that's not necessarily, has probably, some authors would say, necessarily have ever been the most efficient, and not necessarily is the most efficient way of organizing societies nowadays. But technology also sustains city living, so to speak. And so here, this is just a quick list of cities that are moving fast in that direction. If we are going to sustain huge populations in highly populated, demographically populated areas, we depend increasingly on technologies, and technology is making that possible. But here are just a few examples of how we are managing to circumvent problems that come with living in cities, thanks to, and not only despite, technologies. And I think here is where the digital humanities really have a contribution to make, right? Understanding how urban planning and thinking politics get to really indissociable from thinking about technology as well. But again, that said, there's also no denying that at the same time in which new technologies now make it possible for us to face logistical and societal challenges that come with living in civitas. Ironically, the same technologies also make it increasingly less necessary that we live in cities, right? The main reasons that brought us to live in civitas in the first place, now the main challenges now have solutions, technological solutions that make it possible to, I'll make a swapping statement here. They make it virtually, quite concretely possible to dismember cities, right? If we buy the standard narratives that we came to live in cities to fulfill those needs, we don't need to live in cities anymore. If we came to live in cities because it was the only way possible to make water filtering systems cheap enough to be universalized, the technology now allows us to do that virtually in a home-to-home basis. Think smart filters, think smart open and closure water systems that the kind you buy on Amazon nowadays. The same thing with the decentralized sewer system. Think solar panels. Think the change from the gaining mobility, the change from landlines to mobile information communication technologies offer us, and that we will become even more pronounced when we experience the transition from to the 5G signal quality. And also education here, particularly interesting for academics, right? If at some point in history we had to live in cities to get the qualifications we needed to land good jobs, we are now really literally now witnessing an example that's not, strictly speaking, a necessary condition for good education. You can have, of course, all challenges considered, perfectly good education delivered online, and that without mentioning the gains that we still are to experience through a better integration of VR and AR technology into our educational experience, and all that really hugely potentialized by the fact that we can now share all those technologies virtually in real time to the increase of door-to-door logistic. Think Amazon on the spot, same day, drone delivery, right? So why not live outside cities? One of the remaining challenges, I think, that justify the need to stick to cities, and I think we all come back to that when you start thinking about really very simply about maybe I would face a longer commute, but live a little further away from work to get a bigger house. What is the main issue that remains is I will lose productivity. I won't participate in the meetings as much. My skill as an employee will suffer somehow. And of course, that is probably still the main challenge in the technology is trying to face. But the pandemic has really accelerated this process, and we are already learning how to replace old ways of doing our jobs for new ways of doing our jobs. This replacement, this process of de-skilling and reskilling certainly won't be enough to avoid complete unemployment. There will be, here in the pessimistic scenario, most likely massive loss of jobs due to the tendency of automatization, of robotization, with the proviso, with the aggravant that different from the first industrial revolution, second as well, not that from the third, we are now experiencing impact also through white collar jobs. So unemployment will reach us all, not only the factory worker that will be replaced by a mechanical arm, but also you thinker that do not think as quickly as an algorithm. So that will bring unemployment. And unemployment, as you know, here I finally can relax and make the hook to an area where I know a bit better what I'm talking about. Unemployment is one of the main drives, if you want to think in those terms, to human mobility. So from the get-go, we can assume that the pandemics will represent a major push towards massive mobility. For one thing, because it will generate a major process of de-skilling and reskilling that historically has been followed by intensification in global mobility patterns. So what exactly can we expect, well, about this adaptation, about how the world will adapt to this increasing flow in migration, both international migration and internal migration? Uh, Here, I think, do not be scared. I know those are quite a few topics, but they overlap, so I won't go through all of those again when it comes to internal migration. They are pretty much the same with a few details, but I would like to go through each one of those consequences. What do I mean when I say that the new normal, as seen through human mobility lenses, will expose us to a world of slower flow but growing stock and so forth. So let's go through those headlines, to those headers. Uh, in last year, 2019, the global stock, which statistically is the absolute number of people moving around the world, was estimated by the IMO, the UN Migration Agency, IMO, International Migration Organization, at around 270 million people, international migrants, and that includes refugees. And of course, this terminology is discussable. I would discuss this technology, but if I were in another conference, but let's accept this way of doing the math. So let's say that last year the world was witness 272 million people moving around the globe. Migration studies know that along with war that triggers quick, sharp increases in migration, which also reduces quickly when things normalize, the main long-term protracted, the cause that causes migration or pushes migration more intensively and with more permanent consequences, impacts is global economic inequality. And global economic inequality is likely, according to the more recent research by the World Bank, OCDI, and the IMF, is not only not decreasing, as will most likely sharply increase in a world post-COVID-19. And it's fairly easy to understand why we killed all the economically unproductive old people. So the world will be brutally reduced in demographic, and will become the countries that were richer are become even richer, and they will intensify the brain drain dynamics, and so the countries that are poor will become even more poor. Not a very optimistic scenario, but not my scenario. I've seen unfortunately, a fairly consensual scenario. Along with that scenario, we are creating, we are intensifying societal tensions that are triggered by the very presence of migrants. We have to break that stereotype that migrants as a source of problem. Migrants are a source of economic opportunity before anything else. But it's also undeniable that the abrupt arrival of 5,000 people in a 500 people city creates challenges. It would be unreasonable to deny that. And we are creating this kind of circumstance with the border closure policies that we are adopting. We are straining migrants when we close the borders. And not only that, usually when the borders are open, so to speak, they are never open, but they are not strictly closed. When migrants get unemployed, a fair amount of them move back to their home countries. With closed borders, they not only get unemployed, and as they get stuck unemployed into the receiving host countries. So this is a recipe for disaster, right? And we are keeping them stuck, and we are keeping them unemployed. Which are the economic sectors that have been stricken the harder by the COVID pandemics? Food service, hospitality service, retail, wholesale, tourism, transport, manufacturing. What all those sectors have in common? They are intensive into migration labor. So the economic sectors that have been hit the hardest are the more intensive in migration labor. So we're talking here about migrant unemployment, right? At the same time, statistically, it's well established that when unemployment goes up, the unemployment of native-born citizens goes up much slower than the unemployment of migrants. So we are really talking about the migrant unemployment skyrocketing in a post-COVID scenario. With the aggravation here again, that when we had our last economic crisis, 2018, we also witnessed an increase in migration unemployment, but there was an opportunity to migrant. Historically, they cluster around underskilled labor because our economies do not give them access to skilled labor. They could transition from working in a land site to working in a port. Now we are talking about de-skilling and reskilling through highly qualified jobs. So we are not only generating unemployment, keeping them stuck and unemployed, as re-employing them will be much harder than we have faced it so far. And because we have this same Portuguese, misery is never little, right? we are also feeding, the addition of all those factors is pretty much feeding xenophobia, because we are making them a social issue. We are making them unemployed people stuck at border zones without perspective of employment, without the right to move back to their countries, with no support from host countries, and we are forcing them to uphold social isolation. So we are keeping them together. The result, health issues, a higher rate of contagion amid migrants. So, and then they do become vectors, and then they do become the source, the target of xenophobia. So this is state-made xenophobia, you see? Is a crystal clear example of how poorly implemented policy makes the problem worse. Okay, and the last one I'll go through is money remittance. We cannot forget that one of the main reasons why economically active people migrate to richer countries to send money back to their families in their home countries. Historically, when we are hit by economic crisis, remittance go down. When remittance go down, poverty in the home countries go up. When poverty goes up, health quality goes down, the pandemics get worse. So we are fostering the pandemics in a way, right? And to conclude, on the other extreme, you have to remember, there's also the other side of migration, which is highly skilled, highly qualified migration, right? If one thing the pandemics served to show us the lacking qualified doctors, right? MDs. Now we are witnessing, as we are witnessing around the vaccine, we're already witnessing a race to get the doctors. Which country will offer the more beneficial migration scenarios to concentrate doctors? But surprisingly, we are not only talking about white collar works. We are already witnessing in some countries lack of men work to crops. So ironically, some countries I won't mention countries individually, but some countries are literally renting planes to get agricultural workers from poor countries and bring them to crop crops, because agriculture is seasonal. If the crop goes to waste, we're talking about food insecurity. So look at the absurd of the situation. We are importing agricultural migrants nowadays, right? So this is the scenario. So where does this leave us when it comes to internal migration? The same thing, but the number is more than twice as big. The consequence also impacts city inside countries, and the scale is massive. And the dynamic is the same. Mass movement, less money, more unemployment, worse services, more inequality, more tension, right? How am I doing on time, Ricardo? I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Actually, you have already passed your time. If you can conclude it, it would be nice.
Okay, I will conclude it then. So what does that leave us? I think, we have to break the civitas obsession when you think about policies as well. The usual response, they are all conceived from a civitas-centered perspective, right? The usual suspects, the government has to fight inequality. And of course, that is absolutely essential in the long term. But what can we do now? What cities can do now? Or what you, the citizen, can do now, right? And we have many good practices, many good role models that we can, where we can find inspirations, right? Mainly what all of those examples share, to conclude a bit quicker, is access to facilitate access to public goods to the use of small technology, right? So you can do that by creating an app. by buying a smartphone to a migrant. It's as simple as that. None of that comes in replacement, but has to come urgently in addition. So that's what I had to say. The scenario is quite really scary if you go on business as usual, but it can also be quite promising if we follow the innovation route, I think. Thank you. I'm sorry for going through my time. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruno. It was nice to hear your presentation. So to continue with our debates, we're gonna give floor to Dr. Ricardo Esteves. Bruno, I need you to stop sharing your screen, please.
Second, please.
Okay. So let's pass on to Dr. Ricardo Esteves, who is gonna be making his presentation. Ricardo, please.
Okay, everybody's hearing, okay?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, good times, everyone. And for good times, I mean good days, mornings, afternoons, evenings, and nights, depending where you are, all at the same time. And I think this is already a reflex of this new era, a different perception of time, together with the necessary importance of a collective approach to our day-to-day. This late as it seems, it is yet to be consolidated. My name is Ricardo. I am a lecturer at the Department of Architecture and Urban Design. And I'd like to talk about city and planning the city. I'll first like to talk a little about planning and planning cities as a complement of this idea that my colleague just told you about, the human mobility and the flows at the territory point of view. Well, I'll try to share my here. Is it okay? Are you seeing? Are you?
Actually, not. Something happened. It was loading, but it's not showing right now. Okay, this is the one. Yeah. Okay.
Is it okay now?
Yeah. Actually, we can see more than your presentation. We can see a little bit of what the next slide is and things like this, but it's okay. It's possible to read, so please go ahead.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank puc-rio and Ricardo Alencar, as well as his staff, for the opportunity of being here discussing the matters of planning and how to apply these matters to the city, this complex structure where we dwell and spend most of our life. The first thing I'd like to point out about planning is that it concerns time. So we have to face it as a process instead of a product. Sometimes organic, sometimes forced, but always about future. We don't plan neither the past nor the present. Although many scholars say that planning is something inherent to the human species, what is that we, like some other species, frequently use time, efforts, and resources to achieve a certain goal. Planning as a rational chain of events involving a significant amount of time, effort, and resources has been consolidated along the last century. And even during that century, we changed the way we plan. Although the military inclined very early the importance in organizing their efforts and resources to achieve goals at the strategic, tactical, and operational levels, but got similarities with our plan, program, and projects. It was after several conflicts and its impacts on population in general, together with the advent of computers, that civil life had the possibility to gather and process a huge amount of data. So we use a number of inputs to feed computer programs developed to treat and process this data, as well as answer some questions, most of the time in the form of an algorithm. Until the 70s, we used to plan based on tendency, trends, and projections. And by then, we used to treat plan as a product, which was concluded with a bunch of suggestions and recommendations. Having this amount of data laid out in this fashion has helped us to see possible holes showing either the importance of plain information as well as the form it's being displayed. It seems to be very helpful by then. However, during the 70s, a new character has appeared and significantly changed the scenario that is called uncertainty. You see, human society has dealt with lots of shocks during 20th century. Some widespread world wars, the Spanish flu, no offense to the Spaniards, depressions, cracks in stock markets and crops. But since we started to exercise planning, afterwards, no shock produced more impacts as the petroleum after conflicts in the Middle East. After all, we are talking about the far most used energy source in the world, and as far as I know, is still today, despite the advent of alternatives such as nuclear, hydropower plants, sun, wind, biomass, biogas, etc. And then, because of that shift in petroleum value, all the tendencies start to fall apart, with results behaving erratically, exotically, in other words, unexpectedly. And an expectation does not combine with tendency. And since we could not trust in such methodology, trends, tendencies, and projections, the question was, why planning? It's expensive and does not show significant good results. And then planning starts facing a crisis. But on the other hand, it sounds so logical. And again, I maybe have to pay royalty to the same guy in the beginning, but it is, doesn't it? So people around the world in universities, enterprises, and the corporative world start thinking how to plan without having to rely on tendencies and projections. Tendencies and projections are good tools, but we cannot use it as future truths, not anymore. But in the middle of this crisis, here and there, scholars and researchers begin to think about what if we invert the process? What if we do not try to foresee future problems to find solutions in the present and start to define what future we want to happen and which steps we have to take and when to build the future scenario wanted by us, all of us. And please notice that I'm not talking about most of us, but all of us, included in planning all sorts of adjustments and compensation policies. And that is, in my opinion, and of some of my colleagues, the planning process of 21st century. It's a process, not a product, since horizon is always ahead of us. And for each step we take, we have to rethink our goals. Uncertainty is a present character, imposing new thinking all the time. What's a good thing? And involves every one of us, mainly when we deal with public and collective resources and expectations. That is, in a few words, how some of us are trying to plan in these days. Now, I'd like to say a few words about cities. My colleague has already done, but I think it's our habitat, it's our environment. It's a complex contest where we are born, we grow, we learn, we form our families, we work, we laugh, we belong, we experience different experiences, some good, some bad. We assess opportunities, organize and strengthen our ties, our neighborhood, our communities, develop our quality of life, we grow old and we die. Together with thousands or millions of other people who are just like us, with expectations and desires, different cultures, diverse points of view, etc. It is an expensive structure to build housing, places to work, schools, markets, plazas, theaters, museums, stages, universities, fields, roads where we circulate, transport systems, all sorts of facilities, providing water, energy, collecting sewage and domestic residues. But it is our habitat. It's been like this during the last at least 10,000 years or so, and it seems that it will be like this, at least as far as I can see. It concentrates people, incomes, and power, although it's so fragile that depend on the food that comes from the rural areas and all the logistics to reach our tables. So, transforming cities, including uncertainty, new demands, is indeed an expensive issue. Therefore, the decision has to be very well and carefully planned. At this time, I'd like to pose a question. It is indeed very expensive to invest in city, but we should also think about how expensive it's not to invest in cities. We can look around at the same moment and see our cities, our habitats, the problem it's facing, and we are facing living in it, and think how expensive our life is now, and how better it could be, how pleasant it could be, how fulfilling it could be for each and every one of us. A fortnight ago, we participated here on a discussion about social inclusion. That is an imperative matter for our investments. I used to think, living in a city like Rio, how expensive is the fact that it cannot circulate anywhere, any time of the day, regarding all inequality and social injustice there is, and all violence that derivates from that scenario. And how better and pleasant it could be with the right investment, mainly investment in people and in quality of life. Also, a week ago, right here in this same environment, we have been discussing environmental and sustainability matters. And again, I was thinking in so many ways of decreasing the cost of urban life. And that means not only political change, and here I'm not talking about only political parties and instances so problematic in these and several other countries, but mainly cultural changes, our day-to-day behavior. I did not resist and, of course, asked for permission to use a slide from that late discussion on sustainability from my colleague Rodrigo Penaforte, where he poses such reflection on what's the necessary components of our future cities and its dynamics regarding the necessary sustainability. What I'd like to point out is that besides all challenges regarding economic and technical feasibility of alternative for urban contemporary life, we have to add the cultural dimension, and we have to ask what is the necessary evolution. In what concerns to urban mobility, for instance, it is the use of electrical public automobile systems, or maybe bicycles, or simply walking for our ordinary city demands, walk to work, to school, to market. But then we have to rethink and replan the city from the model of one main central business district to where everyone or many people have to go at the same time every day to various nucleus spread throughout the city territory. Of course, there will always be extraordinary demands, and we all know it's not possible nor desirable to have a museum, a university, a big retail, a shopping center, a beach in each neighborhood. And after all, we have the necessity, or at least some of us do, to circulate throughout different parts of the city, to see our neighbors, to feel as part of a human society. So we will always need transport systems of various size and capacities. There is the whole of the electric automobiles public system, for instance. Also buses, underground trains, or subways. Also, we have to think about producing food in the cities with the small urban farms or vegetable or buildings dedicated to producing at least part of the food chain. We have to think in housing closer to business centers. We have to think about small business districts closer to residential areas. And we have to think about turning every roof in the city into water solar heater and solar energy plants. And to collect rainwater to reuse in certain services and reuse served water, saving pure processed water for more noble and necessary services. To spread in neighborhoods points to collect recyclable residues and to process organic ones. Today we had my colleague Bruno Magalhães talk about migration flows. People are coming to cities, and that can be considered a normal event. We are also changing from one city to another, looking after opportunities or quality of life, or for several other reasons. We like to change landscape or urban scape. Also, although the population is not increasing as it did a few decades ago, it is still increasing. Cities will have to adequately respond to these demands. And also we have to rethink our culture, our decision on the day-to-day life. We have to think about what is evolution. I have to say, this is my kitchen, where I enjoy very much to cook. Is a good, noble, and creative active ever. And now, in times of pandemic, is necessary as well as therapeutical. But this is my choice. How it powered my work with electricity or hand. And I'm asking now, after all, what is really evolution? But now I would like to finish this set of provocative reflections talking about the greatest uncertainty I have experienced in my 64 years life, coronavirus, pandemic, and the necessity of a quarantine. It also brought the necessity of adjustment to the city. I don't know about you, but I never thought I would be one of the main characters in a horror story, and that's how I feel. So I have to think about the structure built along millenniums to gather people in times of avoiding crowding. How can cities contribute to forming new habits, considering what is happening right now and all its impacts? And future events like this, we have to face it. It can happen again, anytime, and we have to be prepared. But stress even more the importance of planning cities, also to face these eventual scenarios. We have been noticing new proposals such as using design of public spaces, such as sidewalks, for instance, to induce social distancing. Also the use of parking space in urban roads for activities in open areas, such as tables in bars and restaurants, waiting rooms, resting places, small local gyms, or playgrounds for children. These are some of the first ideas coming from people who are rethinking the city. But maybe the key word in this very delicate moment is resilience. So we, the urban creatures, have to be resilient and survive stronger, as well as city. Our environment, our habitat have to be planned, including high doses of resilience, not only to face the challenges we were already tackling with, such as providing shelter, opportunities, and quality of life to all people, through the design of an environment with quality, dignity, and why not say grace, but also, or maybe mainly, resilience to cope with events such as this. Thank you very much for your attention. Good times to all.
Thank you, Ricardo, for your presentation. If you please stop sharing your screen. Okay, that's perfect. So we are really almost finishing our time. So I'm just going to give Bruno a minute so that he can make a comment on Ricardo's presentation, if he pleases.
You have to turn on your mic.
There you go. All the compliments again. I would say what a huge pleasure it was to listen to you, Professor. I just wanted to ask how much is this we that we can integrate into the planning? That's one of the questions, right? It's, that struck me as challenging, right? Someone has to be the author of the planning, and are we not masking inequality through authorial design in a way? Because it will be one way of planning in the end, right? That's one question. And the second question is about, I thought was brilliantly provocative. You know how similar the very simple and the very high tech, in a way. But do we have a criteria in terms of greater public good? If everybody used an ox cart, would we be able to feed the entire world population?
Okay, I was during your lecture, I was thinking, adding what your ideas to what I was thinking before. I would say that we have to rethink the whole idea of city and the whole idea of being in the territory. The way we think, the idea of cities in this size, let's say, for instance, Rio de Janeiro size, the metropolitan size, maybe we have to shift for a network of cities. And that means that the whole idea of feeding people, of having jobs for people, we are experiencing this home office, what is a good thing, but also for some of us, and I include myself in this bunch of people, we are not familiar with the internet and the use of computer, and I prefer to talk to my students and being present with them. But I mean, this is a shift in some of our habits. What we have to think about is a new idea of these environments, let's say, and a new idea of us in this environment, our role in building and in using, enjoying the life in this environment. I think we have to say. Um, One thing I'd like to point out is the whole idea of planning the cities with one head thinking about plans. I mean, my experience in urban and regional planning, doing some planos diretores, directors plan for cities, uh, points that every time we could gather people to discuss, to go through public inquiries and public meetings and involving the public in this all the discussion, the better, and how people used to align themselves and their behavior to the plans we were building. It's maybe a better way of thinking plan. And since we do not finish plan is a process. The horizon is always ahead of us, so we never finish to plan. We never end a plan. So this is stress the importance even more of having people participating in this plan. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Ricardo. Ricardo, would you like to make any comments on Bruno's presentation then?
Yes, yes. I was thinking about this human migration, looking to the whole planet instead of looking for a small point. And I was thinking how in your opinion, in Bruno's opinions, this all new situation it's producing impacts, and how all this new economic and social structure will be reflected on the geographic dimension, let's say, of human distribution through the territory.
Well, I'll start from the more local, Professor, very quickly. Here in Brazil, I think that we are looking at a return to a north-southeast push due to access to public service. Unfortunately, again, here you measure. I think one data has to do to how many kilometers you have to go through before you can access a hospital. If you want to go from I think London to Paris, so to speak, you go to 360 something kilometers. In Manaus, you go through almost 400 kilometers before you can access a high complexity hospital. So there will be a concentration in Roraima even further. So there will be a concentration around smart cities that tend to they are coming to Brazil through the Southeast again. So the push towards smart city will probably revive the North-Northeast, Southeast divide in a way in Brazil. There is a proclivity. Worldwide, we are seeing further concentration of demographics, high-skilled labor into the OCDI countries. So nothing new, unfortunately. What we're witnessing, absolutely nothing new. What we're witnessing is the old things happening for new reasons. Now it has to do with adaptation to reskilling processes.
Okay, thank you, Bruno. So I'm just going to pass on to the questions then. So what do you, I would say that could be for both of you. What do you think has been done to prepare our cities to face uncertain times like we're living now with the pandemics? Do you think that because we're living this pandemic now, governments are rethinking cities in the sense that they can actually be prepared for a new challenge to come? I don't know if Ricardo, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'll take this. Unfortunately, no, we can see, I mean, we're experiencing here in this country some very problematic issues on integrating the all levels of government. And I have to say, I don't trust any one of them. I mean, we are in the middle of, we have a president who denies what is happening. We have a governor who is involved with the impeachment process. And we have elections for the mayor this year. And this discussion is not being put in the proper place. We are not, the society is trying to do so, but the spheres of government, they are not. They simply are not. I don't know if Bruno agrees with me, but
Bruno, do you have anything to say, or?
I could not agree more. Not only are we not planning, we are actively displanning, I would say. We are denying data, we are refusing, we are not only not helping civil society, we are actually hindering the efforts to plan, I would say.
Okay, thank you. So I'm afraid we've been past time a little bit too much. So I would like first to thank Bruno and Ricardo for the presentations and for the debate. We'd like to thank you all for being with us again today. And just to finish it, I would like to share another invitation. So I would like to invite you all to our next debate that will take place next Thursday. Contemporary challenges to Brazilian democracy, media, politics, and populism, with Alessandra Maia, our professor from the Political Science Department, and Arthur Ituaçu from the Social Communications Department. So you are all invited, and I hope to see you all next week. Thank you for your participation, and have a good day. Thank you all again. Bye-bye.
bye-bye.
Thank you.